mission, our values, and where we wanted to be and grow as a company. So while we were quick to pass on this opportunity, I'm quite certain that the broker most likely called a handful of other groups and someone jumped on the opportunity for the upside. Now, a few days later, fortunately enough, I stumbled across an article about what Mark was doing here in Charlotte. And that was immediately when we decided where we were going to find our space in the multifamily investing world. So fast forward a few months, and we're now working on our first we are now working on our first few handful of deals in partnership with the city and county, looking in East Charlotte and West Charlotte, down in South Charlotte, areas that will be subject to gentrification either now or in the coming years, resulting in ultimately either drastic rent increases if the tenants are capable of staying, or displacement. At the same time, we'll be putting deed restrictions on these properties to preserve the affordability for over a generation to come. And beyond that, we'll be partnering with a handful of nonprofits that can offer these tenants invaluable services, things such as after-school care, financial literacy classes, job training, healthcare services from the city of Charlotte that we can bring all to the doorsteps of these tenants that desperately need it. Looking forward, I certainly feel as though the success of this program will come between the partnership amongst the public, private, and nonprofit sector. The public sector's naturally occurring affordable housing initiative has proved to be tremendously impactful. Mark and what he's pioneered from the private sector has had tremendous results over the past few years. However, I believe that the private sector needs to continue to shift their investment thesis to get a deeper understanding in how their decisions impact the citizens in our community. And beyond that, I feel as though incorporating nonprofits into that partnership offers the private sector guidance into how to tackle complex issues, but at the same time can offer invaluable services for these tenants, because in the end, this isn't just about affordable housing. This is about taking the first step forward to promoting upward economic mobility for all the citizens of Charlotte and giving every citizen of Charlotte the opportunity to succeed. And we can use these affordable housing communities as platforms to connect directly with the individuals that need it the most. And before I end, I just want to take a quick thank you to Commissioner Jarrell for the opportunity to come speak here today, and everyone else for allowing us to come share our story. And we're incredibly excited to work in partnership with the city, county, and various other community advocates. And at the same time, I want to give the utmost credit to Mark for what he's done over the last couple of years. I think it's been incredibly impactful, inspiring. And if as an organization, we can simply accomplish a fraction of what he's managed to do, I think we'll be able to sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that we helped create a better Charlotte for tomorrow and a Charlotte that can set an example for the rest of the nation to follow.
Thank you, Trevor. We really appreciate you being here today and sharing that. What we'll do, team, if you don't mind, we'll hear all the presentations and then we'll have the discussion after. So we'll go to Mark Etheridge. He's with Ascent Real Estate Partners, been a great partner for the county as well. So Mark, we'll let you go with your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Jarrell. Well, Trevor nailed it on the head. I mean, that's what happens every day in the multifamily space is really for the last decade or more, we've had a lot of private equity investment flood into our communities in the form of, gentrifying larger scale multifamily properties. And you guys have seen the newspapers over the last year. We have these mass displacement events that happen from time to time. And those instances that get the headlines are only a fraction of really what happens on the ground. And so every time you read about JT Williams or Econo Lodge or Sterling or Lake Arbor or Brook Hill Village, know that is not a drop in the bucket of what happens on a annual basis in our community. I remember two and a half years ago, we wanted to acquire a 464 unit property that borders Charlotte Country Club, right near my house in Plaza Midwood. And the average rent at the property at the time, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, was around $850 a month. Predominantly Latino families living there, many of whom had been there a decade or longer. And we did not think we could get it done in time, given the amount of partnerships it would need, because it was a large scale transaction. Fast forward 2 years, somebody else bought it for a higher price. They fixed it up a little. They raised rents a lot, and the asking rents of that property for 2 bedrooms are now in the $1,700 per month range. For 1 bedrooms are at $1,450. So if I've looked at the rent roll they have today, and I compare it to the rent roll I saw 2.5 years ago, I can promise you that the vast majority of names on that rent roll from 2021 are no longer there. And where do those people go? And what happens to the kids when they lose that relationship with their guidance counselor, with their teacher, with their coach, with their peer group? what happens to the families when they don't have the access to the services that our neighborhoods, especially in town, on bus corridors, near jobs, near healthcare, near in good school districts, what happens to those families? We don't know, but I can promise it typically spirals a downward trajectory for these families. And when we look at statistics where the average family in poverty is moving every 18 months, we know that really erodes stability from everybody involved. And so we exist to really combat that. We've bought 1,244 units since 2019 in Charlotte, 7 different apartment communities. We've put long-term deed restrictions on each of them. The most promising thing that's happened for us is the advent of Housing Impact Fund, which is a large social impact equity vehicle. Our lead investors being Truist and Atrium Health. That endeavor seeks to buy well-located large multifamily communities here in Charlotte. We set long-term deed restrictions with 30% of the units going to 30% AMI and below, 50% at 60% AMI and below, and 20% at 80%. We wrap around supportive services through the generosity of Atrium Health, borrowing their community health worker model, which is something that they have had in the community for years, but we're now piloting to really put in a place-based model where we have an on-site community health worker orchestrating services for our residents on a day-to-day basis. They're also piloting something new for us, which we'll have a ribbon cutting for in May, where we're actually putting a community-based virtual health clinic on site at our latest acquisition, Pepper Tree Apartments on Central, where we'll have primary care physician services available to all of our residents 35 hours a week on a full-time basis. And so we're really excited about the generosity we've seen from many of the corporate partners in the community, like Truist, like Atrium, and so many other family foundations, endowments, and individuals. We're currently raising our second fund, which we think is going to be in upwards of, $50 or $60 million of private sector capital committed only to preserving naturally occurring affordable housing here in Charlotte, which we're really excited to announce hopefully in about 30 or 45 days here. And I hope we can secure another 1,000 units or more between now and the end of next year. So we are grateful for our partnerships with the county. Not only have you all been incredible partners for us on an innovative rental subsidy program, which doesn't exist anywhere in the country, which is a way to match the property tax revenues that we pay you at these properties and have you appropriate the same amount of funds to housing collaboratives so they can serve 30% AMI households and below at our properties. You also partnered with us to help us tackle Pepper Tree Apartments last November, which was a 292 unit property that had already seen dramatic rent increases, was vulnerable to a private equity buyer coming in and really cranking it up to a magnitude that would have displaced practically everyone at that apartment community. And we were able to come in and through the county and the city's leadership, able to preserve that community and something that we're really proud of. And so we look forward to more of those collaborations in the future. I probably talk to LaShonda every single day, and we're always brainstorming about new ways to help with the community. And so, I'm inspired by what we've done. I'm also really inspired to hear folks like Trevor, come and really add to that wood pile about other folks trying to combat, some of the issues we see in this dire housing market, and see what examples those can do, and also how they can parlay into things like policy initiatives that are really going to try to help residents and help just some of the, frankly, just what has been a housing market that really has not served the community in a way, and something that really needs to be revisited so we can all have a more equitable society.
Well, thank you, Mark, for that. And I do want to add that you teed up something really important, and that's with, you mentioned LaShonda Hart and her team. We certainly couldn't get all these deals done that we've gotten over the last couple of years since you've been in that role without you and the team. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we want to hear from our favorite activists. Boots on the ground is a really important part of this conversation. Robert Dawkins is here with Action NC, also with Jessica Moreno.
Yeah, well, thank you for letting us be here today. I'm Robert Dawkins. I'm the political director for Action NC. I'm going to first give the mic to Jessica to talk for like 4 minutes on the problem. And then I'm going to just spend another like 3 or 4 minutes to talk about what we put before you as far as policy solutions.
Perfect.
Excuse me, Robert, do you want to, Jessica, do you need a PowerPoint?
I do.
I'm just bringing it up for you. Right behind you.
Okay, you can go to the third slide if possible. So thank you. While we wait for that, thank you for letting us speak to y'all today, Robert and I. Our organization has been working on housing issues for many years. Our organization more than more than 10, and Robert more than 20 or 30, 40, I don't know. But, it's interesting the things that we see on the ground. A lot of the communities that Mark mentioned are the ones that we either organized firsthand or supported in any capacity. And so the first thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about was something that corporate landlords, we've been working on for more than 2 years now. And we've been on the ground canvassing, knocking on doors. Can we go to the third slide? Oh, okay, my bad. So yeah, we've been on the ground. We've talked to hundreds of tenants and knocked on thousands of doors. And one of the things that we hear is, the same thing that Mark and Trevor have been talking about. At this point, it's hard to get a house, and the corporate landlords that we're dealing with right now is a single family home. So we have the Progress Invitation Homes, the Tricon American Homes for Rent. Yeah. And we are mainly focusing on these zip codes, Black and brown communities, starter home communities, communities with HOAs. We're touching 60 to 120 homes a day. We have the infrastructure to broaden that scope and that touch. We have the data, the maps, the tablets, everything that we need. We're prepped. Next slide, please. And so the things that we hear, maintenance, bad practices, rising rents every year, but the quality of the housing doesn't go up or diminishes, actually, because there's no proper maintenance. People that have gone months without heat or AC, have plumbing issues, structural issues, and then have higher bills because if they're structural, there's cracks, it's more expensive to upkeep the heat bill, the AC bill. And these corporate landlords own 25,000 homes in Charlotte. And I'm sure there's more as of last year. These are last year's numbers. And they have money, they have cash money that they're offering. And so when we go in and try to buy homes as people with a certain amount of a mortgage, we get outbid every time. And we've seen many news articles on that. Next slide. A lot of the times also what we see is people ending up paying out of pocket for repairs to prevent them from having mold. People are concerned for their families and their kids. And so I've spoken to tenants that have paid out of pocket. Rocky Ridge is a community that has this big, horrible hole. They have a lot of corporate landlords in their community. And some of the solutions for getting that issue fixed is they need 100% or 70% of the homeowners to make a decision. They cannot get a hold of the corporate landlord.
So I was hoping that Commissioner Leak was going to be here today. I thought she was on the committee, but I lived in Rocky Ridge, and in 2014, we came to the county. The issue had been that when our neighborhood was built, the streets were not turned over, so they still owned it. The county reached out to the state. The state said, if the county will front you the money for the roads to be repaired, we will maintain the roads for them. So, we went door to door with the county, tried to come up with enough people, and the amount of money wasn't small. Like for my street, which is a couple streets over, it was going to be $3,000 that was going to have to come out of my pocket, our house, to fix the streets. But Tricon owned 30% of the homes. So the county never could fix the neighborhood all the way back from 2014 because Tricon just decided they were not going to respond to the city. So now it looks like the moon. So when you drive down the street, the neighbors are patching it with concrete or whatever, but there are holes that the side of your car will fall in. So that's
going through that thing.
But that's the main reason I had to move out of the neighborhood. But
slide, please. Another thing is the rent increases. We've heard 300 or more a month every year. And that's something that I've been seeing for over the last 10 years of working in a different industry. But it's beginning to be unachievable for people. So we're asking for some type of cap on that. Next slide. Difficulty purchasing. We've talked about this. It's very hard to make an offer and get the home when these corporate landlords are able to put 30, 40, 50. And I've heard even neighbors say that $100,000 were offered for a home over asking price, wasn't even on the market. Like, and so this is something that, you know, and if you choose to do month to month, then you get $200 to $300 or even $500 monthly, month to month fee. And so that corners people to forced to sign another lease because you don't have a window to actually look for housing or be able to secure housing. And if you're getting outbid every time, I mean, you're getting cornered. Next slide, please. Yep, Hidden Valley. There's a lot of corporate landlords buying in Hidden Valley where predominantly Black and brown people live. It's a Black neighborhood and Black people are getting pushed out. And so this is an issue and we need something to stop it, because even during the pandemic, when there was an eviction moratorium, corporate landlords found a way to evict people and they were still evicting people. And so they're able to go around these things that we try to push for to protect people.
As a group, I mean, we got to hold this number right here, 45.2. If it drops lower on Black and brown ownership in Hidden Valley, we're gonna have major issues. And we cannot, with the amount Progress is buying 5, 10, 15 homes, like in the course of a week. They're going, looking and finding people that maybe they rented the house, which is our biggest problem in Hidden Valley. The person moved, got older, but they own the house. They're renting the house out because the son, daughter may live in Atlanta. They call the person in Atlanta and say the house is valued at $230,000. We'll give you $375,000 today. And they're buying up the houses. We can see, and then by the end of next year, Black ownership in Hidden Valley will probably be around 37%. And we cannot let that continue.
Next slide. That's it. So that's what we're doing. We can scale up. We touch the neighborhoods that are organized. There's a lot of need out here, but we need some policies to.
Yeah. I'll do this really quick. And Starla, you got a few sheets. I'll just go through them really quick, not touch on the bullet points, but make sure you remember and understand what you got. The first one we have put together starts out, says Mecklenburg County and ends community suffering. That's the one that we presented to you when we brought people from the neighborhoods to speak at y'all's public appearance last month. Like Jessica said, we've been knocking, averaging between 60 and 150 doors per knocks over the past 2 years. We've probably got 7,000 people that are impacted by the issue. And as far as letters of engagement, that's like 7,000 people whole. Out of that, we've probably got close to 1,000 that take action. We've got probably like 300 that we say it's time to get rowdy and they get rowdy. But we've built that much up. And from the sheet, you will see we broke down and put from our research from door knocking, focus groups, meetings, and sending them to trainings with our national partners, the list of issues that they see impacts what Jessica calls pain points. You'll see a list of all of the pain points that they're coming by. We came up from them, from our national partners and affiliates, a list of things that we ask that y'all look and consider as far as passing. That's the second half of the sheet. And again, we're here asking, not here demanding. So what we're asking is that you look at those in the light of how we're giving them, which means you don't have to do the exact point, but the spirit of the point. What is it that the county can do? Out of that, the next sheet that you'll see says comparative viability. Out of everything that we listed, everything is within your power, except for 3 bullet points that we had our lawyers check to make sure that preemption wasn't an issue. And out of preemption, which ones were the most viable for y'all to be able to do? So the one that's the easiest for y'all to do is highlighted in green, you'll see, and that's affecting corporate landlords licensing. You know, if they're not doing, if they're not living up, if they're not being good standards, what can y'all do with their licensing? The next one you'll see is communities and the ability for the people to organize, like giving you Rocky Ridge as an example. The community is stuck because they don't have anything that they can do to organize around it. And that's a yellow. You'll have some of the ability to do it, but you would need some help from the General Assembly. And then the last one you'll see is listed as red. And that was our biggest one, and that's capping. And that's where we reached out and working with Kelly Alexander to give you the power to cap. And on that, what we're asking is, I know Commissioner Jarrell, y'all were talking about making some ask part of your legislative agenda. What we're asking is that you make the capping part of your legislative agenda to support, the progressive organizations on what we think is important, what progressive legislators like Kelly Alexander think is important. And even though we know that it's not going anywhere, we're not doing it for just that. We're doing it because Mecklenburg County should be on the side of right. And right now, no county, there are other counties that are trying to get it put before in Atlanta, in San Francisco, and in these areas, but nobody has made it part of the legislative agenda. Mecklenburg County would be the first progressive agenda that made it. Similar to some of the things we've asked for before. We asked for the ability to change citizen review board with the city when they came and they said they couldn't. Took 8 years, but we were able to get it. We asked the city if we could get 30% AMI included in housing trust fund. They said they couldn't do it. 4 years later, we were able to get it. So we're hoping that y'all will be the group that will champion this. And again, some people get confused a lot of the time and think that us as progressive groups are just out here to yell, scream, and holler that we're anti-police. We're not anti-police. We're pro-justice. We're not anti-investor. We believe in everything that Mark has done. Mark has found room for our family, our people in Arbor Glen and all that. We're anti-usury. And right now, Tricon, Progress, and these people are using their ability of a lack of law to make it to where nobody's going to be able to afford to live in Charlotte anymore. And I cannot work to increase and improve home ownership if people keep going further back down on not being able to afford rent. It's a cycle that's, it's usury. And until the General Assembly addresses it, y'all are the people that we're asking to stand in the gap, because we love Kelly Alexander. He's been one of our main reps to fight for our issues, but most of the time he's there by himself. And we're hoping that Mecklenburg County will at least stand with him and make his bill H-114 part of the legislative agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great information so far, and Representative Alexander just came in right on time. Yeah, so actually, we teed up this conversation today, and we actually teed it up with what you've done from a legislative perspective or what you're trying to do. And so if you would give us an update on your bill and where you are with it, and where do you think it's going to go?
Well, it's parked in rules right now. My last conversation with the speaker tells me that the speaker and I have philosophical differences as to what should be done. To put it bluntly, the speaker and a lot of folk on his side don't believe in restrictions on private property and what folk can do with their money. I think that we have to also take a look at what happens when individuals who generally are limited in their resources go up against corporate interest, which generally are drawing, their resources from Wall Street and, other places, and are in a much, they have, more capital to be able to buy neighborhoods. Most of us can't buy neighborhoods. I know I can't buy a neighborhood. To buy complete apartment complexes. And when you take a single family neighborhood or a single family block and you consolidate it, as at least one company in North Carolina has between 1,400 to 2,000 what formerly were single family properties, which are now rental properties. So when you have that kind of purchasing power, you're distorting the market and making it much more difficult for individuals to compete, especially if you're looking for, starter homes. My bill would simply propose in the 15 largest counties where we know it's a problem right now, that there would be some caps on the number of single family homes that kind of capital could own. The proposal would be to cap it at 100. And some people have asked me, well, why 100 and not 50, or why 100 and not 200? Well, 100 seems to be a reasonable place to start. And as anything in the legislature, you have to start somewhere as a point. It is a point of negotiation. But literally, the message that the bill is sending is we should be doing something to make it much more difficult for unbridled, capital to just come in and wipe out our neighborhoods. I have discovered that this bill is the first of its kind generated at a state legislature level. So there are a lot of people who are taking a look at it. There's been a lot of interest in the press about it. There have been a lot of individuals who have been interested, in it. A lot of people contacted me about it. What really needs to happen, I believe, is we have to demonstrate to the powers that be in Raleigh that there is interest at the grassroots level for this kind of thing. And that means that the 15 largest counties, of which Mecklenburg and Wake are 1 and 2, ought to organize and let their representatives in General Assembly know that they have an interest in this kind of legislation, and that at a minimum, it ought to be heard. Because again, I started out by telling you this thing is in rules. Well, that's a good way to make legislation disappear. And it only comes out of rules, especially when the leadership is opposed to it, when they see that, the League of Municipalities, the county associations, these organizations are taking an interest in it, allowing their lobbyists to go out and talk to people about it. I've heard, for instance, somebody said, well, there was an article in the Charlotte Observer, and the rejoinder was, well, we don't pay attention to the Charlotte Observer, i.e. it's too liberal, it's in the wrong place, and y'all a bunch of Democrats. But I don't look at this as a partisan measure. It's a people measure. It's a social responsibility, measure. But you see, people who believe as I do tend to be unorganized, tend to think that stuff just can happen. It's the right thing to do, and therefore I'm gonna get up. The rain is gonna fall on my field. The crops are gonna grow. The sun's gonna shine, and we're gonna all sing "Kumbaya." It doesn't work like that. I'm sorry. We have to put in the work, and that means that the counties where this is most affected need to be upfront and vocal about wanting some kind of dialogue, some kind of change. There are a couple of other measures that are out there that I think would help with overall housing affordability, but you didn't call me in here today to sing and dance about that. So I'm gonna shut up. I'm through.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for all the presenters that are here today. I'm going to open up to my colleagues. I'm going to start with Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have, well, I do have a question. Well, first of all, I want to say how inspiring it is to hear Trevor's story, and I really appreciate Mark Etheridge and the work that he's done, and the fact that it's, that you have sort of attributed what you have done, Trevor, to sort of a spinoff effort of what Ascent has been able to accomplish. And I I think that is a huge success story that, you know, we have a spinoff of another company that wants to do similar work. And I just hope it catches like wildfire and we have some more folks who want to do it, because obviously it's been very successful. So I really appreciate that you brought that story here to us today, because it gives me hope that we can, you know, make an impact. And so because of guys like you. But I think my question really is for Representative Alexander on what you just said about it's not a partisan issue, it's a people issue. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people issues that just die on the vine because of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle view, I mean, just as you said, people who believe as I do, you said that phrase a couple of times, and it seems like they don't believe as we do on the other side of the aisle on many issues. And so I really don't even know how to advocate at a county level when I mean, we feel like we're in the minority. I don't know how to do that. I need guys who've been at this longer than me to help me understand how can you take things out of a partisan lens and really make progress, you know? I just don't know how to do it. So
Well, you've got a county association that represents all of the counties in the state.
but it's run by the county association. We are in the minority there. Okay, like,
But you don't have to be. I'm not trying to take you to task or anything, but it's been my observation that the larger counties have tended to take a back seat in that organization, and that the smaller counties, you know, drive it.
mhm.
And that personally, I think that's a mistake, because it means that the interest of the larger counties, they don't get just the back seat, they're on the bumper somewhere.
Mhm.
Thank
So
you for
if-
calling the office of Congresswoman Anna Adams. How can I help you?
Can I still call?
We were all in.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
They're, you know, they're on the bumper, you know, somewhere. And so that the county association, you guys have got a lobbyist up there. You have an agenda. This is an issue that needs to be on that agenda. Your lobbyist needs to be talking to folk. Your lobbyist talks to people across, you know, all spectrums of political belief. And you've got to just keep over and over saying that in order for folk to understand it. Look, I've worked ever since I got into the legislature to try to get them to start looking at our drug laws and do some reform. It's taken me a dozen years just to get where we are right now, where we are on the verge of being able to pass a medical marijuana bill. Every kind of variation of that bill you can imagine has been introduced in that dozen years. But it has taken, at the end of the day, first, not caring who gets the credit, realizing that because the conservatives are in control of the legislature, that in order for a bill to be successful, it had to start in the most conservative chamber and had to be driven by conservatives.
Mhm.
Now, does that mean that the bill has everything in it that I want, all my bells and whistles? Nope. But does it mean that it'll pass this year? I think it will. And that creates the foundation. You don't start building the third floor before you got a foundation, unless you know something about anti-gravity that I don't. And that's the same thing about, you know, the housing. You've got an association. If that association is not paying attention to urban issues, and this definitely is an urban issue, before you can really get traction in the legislature, you've got to make sure that that association is with you, 100%. And that means paying, I think, more attention to it.
Thank you.
Commissioner McDowell, the thing that I would add quickest again, I think that we should be the one that's on the side of right. When it comes to partisan stuff, it's these what Jessica calls pain points. So right now, the 15th largest counties, Charlotte, Mecca, Wake, they're the ones that's feeling it. Conservatives will get on board once those pain points start getting to rural areas. But I think we should be up front before that. If you look and study organizing history, my wife works for Wells Fargo, so this isn't anti-Wells Fargo, but the largest corporate landlord campaigns was back in the 1920s, and it was Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo was what was called revenuers, and they were going into rural areas and they were taking people's houses. And conservatives at that point said from the beginning that we shouldn't be able to mess with businesses until they started taking farmers' houses. Farmers was then stuck with having to eat their mule and figure out what they were going to do with their kids. Then the conservatives came up and said, you know what, this is doggone wrong. And they went and fought all these anti-bills against Wells Fargo and those from taking people's houses. This is exactly the same thing that Progress and Tricon and those are doing. It's a different frame, but it's the same thing. We can't wait on conservatives to have a conscience, but I think Mecklenburg County should.
Are you good, Commissioner?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to you two for what you're doing, the community, and thank you to Action NC for continuing to pressure us, and what you're doing every day out there. Thank you. And thank you for being here, Representative. My question is, you've given us some ideas of what maybe we could do, but we did receive a presentation on this from Dr. Allen. And I'm curious because I don't remember these. Is this the ordinance? I mean, is that something we, obviously this has been researched. And I hate to put you on the spot, Dr. Allen. I don't know if, can we do this? Are we willing to do this? What is it going to take for the commissioners to do this? Maybe Starla, you can help. Derek, I don't know. Does that all my questions make sense?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Meyer, for the question. I'll just start and I'll turn it over to our colleagues, but you're correct. We briefed the board with initial presentations. The board included, $500,000 to examine the impacts of corporate landlords. So we started the process to research. Right now, we're in the stage of community engagement, and Monica's team can speak to that further, but we already started in January to speak with both the real estate industry and also about to kick off community engagements to understand what the community wants us to do or what areas they want us to really dive in on this topic. And then we'll take that information and then come back to the board with some concrete recommendations. But I can turn to Monica or Starla to talk more in detail about the recommendation, but that was our plan.
Can I jump in real fast with the community engagement? Isn't that what Action NC is doing? Have you worked?
Normally, unless the county's like 100%, we want you to do the work like we did with the county for COVID.
Yep.
And they said, hey, y'all are out there every day. Well, y'all go do it. We don't really do the RFP. Our whole part is we're going to be out there. We don't have the scale, the scope, the PhDs. What we do have is the legwork and the ability to help. So anytime that the county needs help, we're willing to help in any way, but we don't put in for the RFP. So Dina may call and say, hey, we need a neighborhood knock. Are y'all willing to do that? Or we're not having enough people sign up for a focus group. Are you willing to help us do that? We would rather be the boots on the ground and the coffee drinking RFP getting group that talks to y'all every day.
Okay.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, so thank you for your question. So I will start with Mr. Dawkins. Is that correct? His response. So he did reach out to Deputy County Manager Trotman and asked, what ways can his group get involved in? He did mention, or you did mention that you decided not to compete for the RFP. So now we're at a place where we have entered into agreement with Lee Institute, and they're going to go out and do a very robust community engagement effort that we were going to actually follow up with you and say, now that we have the RFP signed, we may want to direct you to them because they're going to get a lot of insight from the community in terms of what does the community need? How has this issue impacted them directly? What can the county do specifically? And then hopefully, I think by summer, I believe, we'll be able to bring some full scale recommendations back to the board. But we want to get really rich information insight from the community through multiple means like focus groups, surveys, engagements with developers, HOAs, just a whole bunch of individuals, so it is a full large scale, I would say, further study on this issue concern that we have in the community. So that's the first piece. With regards to your comment about, are these things that we can do in an ordinance from an ordinance perspective? I think that's something that you probably want to talk to Attorney Tyrone Wade about, just to get his opinion and thought, only because in fairness and balance to this bigger issue, counties are getting sued, right? In terms of corporations are going after local governments with regards to how much they push back. So it could be that once we hear information from the community, that coupled with, should we do this or not, that maybe that's a question that can be answered there. But I don't know if I'm in a position to speak to what we could do with regards to an ordinance.
Over the years, Commissioner, what we've tried to do is bring before Dina and staff, this is our wish list. Here's where it's working. Here, maybe preemption will stop. And the one thing that I can say about Ms. Diori is she's good to say that we can do, that we can't. This we can follow up on, and don't come back and ask me about this again. We are able to take that and move and make
Not our
effective.
county
And
manager.
but we're able to do that and make effective policy, we believe.
That,
Can I remind you of a line from a philosopher? You don't have to be a weatherman to see which way the wind blows. Study is great. Focus groups are wonderful. But legislation moves at the speed of light.
That's right.
If you go through this entire process, you will come to a conclusion about what you can do about, 8 weeks after the legislature has gaveled down, except for redistricting type, issues. And so you will miss the boat for this session, which means that it'll be the next session before all of the information that you have gathered could be an input into what might be put on the table then. I say that to say that you got two different speeds at which these levels of government are moving. And you have to pay attention to what's going on in the legislature, because this is a Dillon rule state, okay? At the drop of a hat, some yahoo in the legislature can get up and drop a bill, and everything that you thought you could do, you suddenly find out you can't. As far as that's concerned, some yahoo can drop a bill and the parameters of your county can change. And it just takes a majority of the folk that happen to be there in both chambers at a particular time in order for that to happen. So you've got to recalibrate how you think about engagement. Yes, it's great to engage with the grassroots and all of these wonderful processes. Yeah, I went to school and I learned about them too. But from a practical standpoint, what we all learned in Civics 101 and what's really happening in the cut and thrust of trying to engage in political change, they're on two different timelines. We got to try to figure out how to harmonize those timelines so that you can be effective. Because it doesn't make sense for you to go through a process that enables you to arrive with too little, too late.
I say one more thing.
Absolutely.
I just want to make the comment that as commissioners, I think that, and speaking on the NCACC, you talked about the organizations, I think it's on us to lobby our own colleagues to really pressure the organization. I never even thought of that. And I mean, we need to begin there. So that's all.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Star, and then Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to layer on from the legislative perspective. Again, so happy that Dr. Allen and her team are here to talk about some of the research the county has already conducted and where we are in the process. We do speak in our legislative agenda to the evaluation of addressing housing security such as affordable housing and specifically examining the impact of investor-owned properties. So we do have that broad mirroring or aligning language in our legislative agenda. Last year, I want to add that Dina and the executive team member, our Deputy County Manager Trotman, we were in DC and we met with a senior advisor for President Biden in the adjacent White House office. And we took this to them as an agenda item, as one of the first counties, because, you know, housing is not traditionally always one of the areas that counties, much as what we've done with MEC pre-K, the counties have taken the forefront on. And so in Mecklenburg County, we're already kind of trailblazing ahead with that. And the Biden administration, they were very pleased to hear about the work that we were doing. The next week, the Biden administration announced their own provisions to try and look at the impact of investor-owned properties. And, you know, some of the language they had, as well as what mirrors what Dr. Allen's team showed, in addition to limiting possibly having some limitations, also incentivizing developments such as the projects that we're doing here in Mecklenburg County. And so you're absolutely right, Representative. There's so many different tracks to take on this. There is a mirroring act that's been introduced in Congress as well that would do this. And so that again would give states or counties more protection from being sued if this is done from a larger angle rather than at the county level. And so again, granted, Attorney Wade would need to weigh in on that, but having this from the state perspective more so than the county local level does offer that guidance and that structure for this type of intervention with housing accessibility. And so I just wanted to give you all credit, the board credit, for already being at the forefront federally and at the state level to be engaged in housing. And it is something, you're right, that we do push with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. And then lastly, for those that are on the line that may not be familiar with Dillon rules that the representative brought up, which is really important, it basically means that in our state, counties have to be given authority to do things. And so if we don't have the prescribed authority in law to do something, even if we have the best idea, we cannot do it unless the state has a statute that allows us to do it. Unlike in some areas of the country, counties can do those great ideas without asking permission if they're not prohibited. So in our case, we have to be given authority to do anything other than what we're already prescribed in the North Carolina statutes to do.
Thank you, Starla. Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell, anything else?
No.
So a couple of things that I want to tee up. One, I think it's always important for us to understand that the problem that we're addressing, in any of the problems that we're addressing, is always going to be the solution. Typically is going to be policy, right? I mean, that's just how we work, right? It's going to be policy to address the problems. And so this particular conversation hopefully will lead to legislation. But we're talking about real people. I think we can't miss that. We're talking about real people. You know, you're talking about people in this community where they may be at 60% AMI and below, and you just can't afford it. And I'm not sure if LaShonda has this information, but the Pepper Tree deal was a perfect example of why the preservation of NOAAs is so important and why we need to invest. And so when you think about the rents in LaShawn, I don't know if you have that data, but essentially, you keep me honest, and Mark, I know you can speak to this as well, but we were keeping rents between $500 and $700 for those folks, plus the addition of wraparound services. And so when you think about that level of support that comes from that, we have to have corporate entities that have the lens that will be an ethical lens that is going to support people in this community. I think all of us are committed, every elected in this room on that phone. When we talk about equity and we talk about the commitment to the people that we serve, none of us want to just see arbitrarily, you have to be a person of means to live anywhere in this community. Like, that's just ridiculous. And that's not something that we'll ever support. So Do you have that data, LaShonda?
Mark has the
Mark,
updated
do
numbers.
you want to speak to that? Make sure I keep my numbers honest though, but we had 292 units.
Yeah.
And I know that the rents were within a certain range for the overwhelming majority of those folks.
Well, yeah, it's a 292 unit property. We struck the deal for the rental subsidy program that serves 30% AMI and below households. And typically the rents in that bracket are going to fall between $300 and $500 a month. So you guys are appropriating the property taxes that we pay you every year, sending it over to Housing Collaborative, and they're chopping up those revenues into rental subsidies to drive those rents down to that $300 and $500 a month range. That serves 44% of the 44 of the units of the property. The other 44 units go to folks at 30% AMI and below who already have existing vouchers. Like we house a military veteran with a BASH who've been looking for housing. He's been in a shelter since October. He moved in this week over at Pepper Tree. Some of your HVs that you guys are having, the community's having a very difficult time placing. We're housing those folks. We're seeing a lot of fallout from the from shelter plus care and folks from traditional kind of scattered site models that have traditionally relied on market rate landlords, and the market rate landlord community is unequivocally saying no to vouchers these days. They want more money. They don't want to deal with the bureaucracy. There's a stigma against low income households. And so, more and more we're bearing the burden of housing folks, which is our mandate to do. But I wish we had the private market sector as a partner in this work like they were 10 years ago. And unfortunately now it's falling on, folks who are mission oriented and or nonprofit. And so we faced a lot of challenges there, and across the board at Pepper Tree, the asking rents were in the 1400s for ones and 1700s for twos the day we bought it. And the day we bought it and recorded that deed restriction with your support, those asking rents, even for our highest income earning families at 80% of AMI, fell by at least $500 a month.
Yes.
And so now, we don't have a single one bedroom rent over $1,000 a month of that property. They're all in the 850 to 965 range. The two bedrooms fallen dramatically. And so we've had some, it's when we started really getting going in 2020 when Erskine and Nelson raised Housing Impact Fund. I thought the most important thing we would do was develop this rental subsidy program for 30% AMI. And it's still close to probably my favorite thing that we do. I never realized the impact that those 50, 60, and 80% AMI units would have, because we're housing people living in motels that make $60,000 a year. People are in motels making $60,000 a year because they have one eviction on their record or a credit score issue or justice involved. And, just the myriad of situations that cause housing insecurity is so much broader than I think the general public might understand. And certainly something that I didn't really know until we've gotten years into this to kind of learn about the people that we're housing. And so it's an issue that really needs to be addressed across the AMI spectrum at 80% AMI below. Of course, our deficit and the value proposition is greatest for those 30% AMI and below households. But, there really is a need everywhere, just so the market has gotten so ruthless in so many ways, even if it's not just income and rent, if it's about anything on background history, like justice involved, like credit score, like eviction history, it's making life very difficult for a lot of families.
Yeah, I'm glad you used the term ruthless. I think that's appropriate for what we're seeing in the community. So I know our school board member who's here, and she also chairs the IRC committee for them, wanted to add a comment or a question, and that's school board member Snead.
Thank you, Commissioner Jarrell. I just want to say, I'm here today because these issues intersect all bodies of government. So it intersects particularly with the school board in the sense of that we have teachers that are homeless. I'm going to say that again. We have teachers that are homeless. So we have teachers that teach in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools that are unable to obtain steady housing. And that's for a number of reasons, right? And it's not independent of the fact that, what their pay is, that we have to deal with that. But that coupled with the rising cost of rent here in Mecklenburg County, can we maintain them? Can they be invested in our communities and in our neighborhoods when they have to live outside of county? How effective can a teacher, what kind of odds are we adding to all of the other additional challenges that they have when they are unstable in housing? And so it not only affects, so most of the time we think of our children, and we do have a population of children that are considered unsheltered in those families, and that is about 3,700 children. But we also have teachers that have unstable housing. Like I have to, keep repeatedly say that it is important that we move in the direction to make sure that those are in our communities are housing stable.
Thank you for that, School Board Member Sneed. Also, I know we have another elected official online, Amelia Stinson Wesley, who had some comments or questions.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Drill. I actually wanted to just support with a couple of stories. You know that in addition to wearing the elected official hat, I'm also a pastor in East Charlotte. And my church is located really near Pepper Tree, so near that there are people in that community, in that housing development that walk to my church, and I'm their pastor. And the fact that rent has been stabilized and that those places to live are consistent is a tremendous help to people in my congregation. I just want you to know that from a personal perspective, it's working and we are grateful in that area. A church that I used to pastor in West Charlotte near the Wayland Apartments is that I have people who I used to be their pastor reaching out to me asking for assistance because their living situation is going to stop accepting Shelter Plus. And that's just a cause for concern. I am so grateful for the work that you have done, but the road is still rocky ahead of us. So thank you.
No, thank you for that. Commissioner Meyer, did you have anything else?
I just have one question,
Sure.
Mark. Your health center that you're opening, are you partnering with a clinic like Starmount or,
Atrium.
StarMed? Atrium.
Atrium, yeah. So that like the Dr. Grin, she's been pioneering these clinics out in some of the rural counties outside of Mecklenburg, and they've got a great model. This is the first time I think in North Carolina, and we're exploring if anyone in the region or maybe nationally has put this into an affordable housing community. But they, I can't speak any higher than I can of Atrium and the support they've given us, not only by taking their community health worker model and embedding it into our properties, but also tacking on resources, because when we've surveyed our residents, which we're pretty far along on the first two properties we've acquired, access to healthcare is coming up in the top 3 in terms of barriers they're facing across the board.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, we're excited.
It is just a phenomenal idea and so needed. So thank you. And thank you to Atrium.
Another shout out for Atrium too is also
Speaking
part
of Mike Rowe.
also part of this, our violence intervention program work, which, was focused through Cure Violence. Atrium has its own violence intervention program that it started to where anyone that enters the hospital that's been shot gets automatic intervention care from the beginning until they turn it over to the Cure Violence team. So Atrium's been a great partner with us on the grassroots level.
So that's fantastic. One of the things that I'm hoping that we can do, well, first, let me acknowledge our Planning Commission Chair, Kiva Samuels, who is joining us as well. So thank you for being here. Representative Alexander pointed out a couple of things with respect to his bill, but he gave us a roadmap of the way things work in Raleigh, which I think most of us don't have a lot of visibility around. What's the best way to get traction in a hyper partisan sort of environment? And one of the things that I heard you say was to really advocate and from a collective perspective. And that will draw some attention. Is that a fair synopsis of where you're coming from?
Yeah, if you go to the state government website, you'll see that the co-sponsors of my bill basically come from those 15 counties. And that's where I would start.
Okay.
In terms of organization. For this session, I hate to say this, but for this session, that bill is a long shot. But if what we're able to do is to start a conversation to get some focus, especially among such a diverse group of counties, it becomes much easier the next go round. And there has to be a next go around. This is not a one-shot deal. When I got to the legislature, somebody told me that I don't care what the measure is, it's gonna take you 3 years to get anything passed. And I laughed. And now I look back in retrospect and say that was wildly optimistic. It's a slow process, but it has to start somewhere. And it has to start, I think, with, coordination of interest. And our larger counties do have a coordinated interest. Not so much right now in the rural counties, simply because if you live in a county with 25,000 people totally, and you live in a county where you can find 25,000 people in a neighborhood, there's a difference in emphasis. And, we see this all the time. Sales tax. If you live in one place, you look toward Mecklenburg and you see the solution to your problems by taking resources from Mecklenburg and Wake and, places like that. If you live in Mecklenburg and Wake and other places, every dollar that goes somewhere else potentially represents a dollar that you've got to raise by raising property taxes on our residents. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done to make folk understand that our problems today are your problems tomorrow. And tomorrow is a lot shorter than you might think.
Yeah. Well said. A couple actions that I would like for us to consider. Number one, if Starla, we could get, the committee could get a list of the 15 counties that Representative Alexander is referencing, that would be helpful. Two, I really want to figure out, to your point, Representative Alexander, it's a long play for us, but from a committee perspective, how do we support it? That piece of legislation. I don't know if it's with a letter or a resolution or something, but I would like for us to consider that so that we're taking some actionable steps and not just talking about it. One of the things that I want everybody to understand is from this committee, we've taken action steps, whether it's source of income discrimination and so many other areas where we put forth sort of initiatives around policy, and that's what we'll continue to do. So I think we really need to figure out what that next action step could be. And the final point would, I think we also need to make sure our colleagues have visibility to this discussion today and all this information. I think it was effective because it was comprehensive. So we went grass roots to grass tops and everything in between. And so I think that makes these conversations very, very effective. We already have the data. We're already moving forward with respect to another study around it, but which we need to proceed. But that's kind of what I would ask us to consider. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that would end this portion of the meeting. Again, I want to thank everybody who is here and who presented and for all the work that you're doing. And we certainly want to be a great partner for you with respect to that. Do we have any other business on the committee? Yes.
Mr. Chair, we just want to remind you all of registrations of upcoming conferences. Of course, the NACO annual conference is coming up. And if you receive any invitations to participate on any panels, let me know as I try and have a conference-wide list of events and things that Mecklenburg County Mecklenburg County representatives are participating in. The same for the annual meeting for the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners will be this summer. However, the Advocacy Day is coming up, and I think your meeting schedule has been adjusted so that you can attend that. So those registrations, if those aren't done, I encourage board members to complete those registrations. And that looks like it's a different way of doing the conference this year with the dinner the night before, The next day will be meetings with the delegation. There's not a lunch currently included as in the past. I'm exploring options, or if that's a good way to try and have the legislative delegation come into us. Its committee meetings are so varied during the day. We may still need to host something ourselves at lunchtime. So I'm figuring all that out. We'll be making a recommendation for our itinerary for that meeting. So that's my only reminder of those two conferences.
Are you saying that we should be registering for that? I thought there was something collective happening with that for the county advocacy day.
For the advocacy day, so board support, Lisa would probably help you with that registration. It's still separately done for each commissioner as with the other conferences. So she may be compiling that. I think we're working on transportation and how to help with the logistics as a group so that we can travel to and from the meeting site, from the conference, the convention center over to the legislative building. So we're trying to work on the best way to do that, but the registrations are individual.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, Starla. I appreciate that. The committee has no other business, so.
I can't believe we're gonna end early. Like, what? 13 minutes of our day?
Hey, get
back?
13 minutes of your day back. And with
Well,
that
it's
said,
never
we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, I'm stunned.